They looked normal. A neighbor, a coworker, a stranger passing by on the street, but behind those friendly smiles lurked something evil. For decades, some of the most terrifying killers in history lived among us, unnoticed. They went to work, they had families, they blended in. But when night fell, their true nature emerged. These aren't horror movie monsters, they were real, and their crimes left behind a legacy of fear that still lingers today. Tonight, we're peeling back the curtain on 10 of the most disturbing serial killers America has ever seen. Some were never caught, some are still alive, and the most chilling part, one of them may have walked past you. Let's begin. He looked like a harmless old man, frail, soft-spoken, and polite, but Albert Fish was one of the most depraved killers in American history, a sadistic predator who delighted in torture, cannibalism, and the suffering of the innocent. In the early 1900s, Fish roamed New York, preying on young children. He lured them in with promises of candy, kind words, and a grandfatherly smile. But once they were in his grasp, he revealed the full extent of his monstrosity. Fish's crimes went undetected for years, but his most infamous act was the abduction of 10-year-old Grace Budd in 1928. He convinced her parents to let him take her to a fake birthday party. She was never seen alive again. Years later, the Budd family received a letter. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting shaky, but the words inside were pure horror. Fish described in sickening detail how he had lured, tortured, and eaten their daughter piece by piece. Investigators later discovered that Fish had been practicing self-mutilation for years, embedding needles into his own groin. X-rays revealed over 29 needles lodged inside his pelvis. When sentenced to the electric chair in 1936, his last words were chilling, "I don't even know why I'm here." And when the switch was flipped, the needles in his body caused the electric chair to short-circuit. Even in death, Albert Fish remained a true horror. Los Angeles, 1984. A heat wave blanketed the city and people left their windows open for relief. But for Richard Ramirez, an open window was an invitation. He was the embodiment of chaos, random, brutal, and merciless. Unlike most serial killers, he had no specific victim type. Young or old, male or female, it didn't matter. Ramirez broke into homes in the dead of night, slaughtering entire families with a depraved mix of stabbing, bludgeoning, and shooting. He carved satanic symbols into his victims' flesh, forcing them to swear allegiance to the devil before taking their last breath. The city lived in terror. People installed extra locks, bought guard dogs, even slept with their shoes on in case they had to run. But in August 1985, his reign of terror ended in a way no one expected. Ramirez was spotted in East LA and chased by a mob of civilians who beat him nearly to death before police arrived. In court, he showed no remorse. He smiled for cameras, flashing a pentagram carved into his palm. When sentenced to death, he turned to the jury and whispered, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory." But he never saw the execution chamber. Instead, he died of cancer in 2013, leaving behind a legacy of pure evil. In July 1991, Milwaukee police entered apartment 213. The smell hit them first, a thick, putrid stench. Then they saw the Polaroids. Dozens of pictures showing dismembered bodies, severed heads stacked in the fridge, a barrel of acid filled with human remains. And in the bedroom, a twisted shrine of skulls. Jeffrey Dahmer wasn't just a murderer, he was a collector. His victims were young men, lured into his apartment under the pretense of photo shoots or parties. But once inside, Dahmer drugged them, strangled them, and then experimented. He drilled holes in their skulls, injecting acid in an attempt to create zombies, men who would obey him completely. But it never worked. They all died, becoming pieces of his personal horror museum. When police finally arrested Dahmer, he confessed everything in chilling detail, admitting, "I should have been caught a long time ago." But justice came in an unexpected way. In 1994, while serving his life sentence, another inmate bludgeoned him to death in prison, beating him so severely that his skull cracked open. A fitting end for a man who caused unimaginable suffering. He was handsome, Charismatic, well-spoken, women trusted him, and that was their first mistake. Ted Bundy didn't need to stalk his victims in the shadows. He lured them in broad daylight with a fake cast, a phony limp, or a simple request for help. Once they let their guard down, he struck. From 1974 to 1978, Bundy went on a killing spree across 7 states, brutally murdering at least 30 women, though experts believe the number was much higher. He didn't just kill, he savored it. Bundy strangled, bludgeoned, and mutilated his victims, often returning to their corpses for days, brushing their hair, applying makeup, talking to them like they were still alive. In 1978, after escaping from jail twice, Bundy was finally caught in Florida. His last attack was a savage slaughter at a sorority house, leaving 2 women dead and 2 more maimed in mere minutes. When sentenced to the electric chair, Bundy pleaded for his life, blaming pornography for his crimes, but the public wanted him dead. On January 24, 1989, crowds gathered outside the prison, cheering as he was executed. His last words, a chillingly simple, "I'd like to give my love to my family and friends." He made kids laugh. He entertained families at parties. He even dressed as a clown, a friendly, goofy character called Pogo. But behind the makeup was something truly evil. Between 1972 and 1978, John Wayne Gacy lured and murdered at least 33 teenage boys and young men in his Chicago home. Many were runaways, drifters, or boys he hired for construction work. He tortured his victims before killing them, using a twisted trick he called the rope trick, a slow, deliberate strangulation. And when the bodies piled up, he buried them under his house. When neighbors complained about the foul stench coming from Gacy's home, police investigated. What they found shocked the nation, a crawlspace filled with corpses. Even in prison, Gacy remained disturbingly unbothered. He painted self-portraits of himself as Pogo the Clown and sold them for thousands of dollars. His final words before execution in 1994, "Kiss my ass." He was 6'9", an intellectual, and had an IQ of 145, but Ed Kemper's mind was a labyrinth of horror. Between 1964 and 1973, he preyed on young women in California, picking up hitchhikers only to decapitate them. He would take the heads home, speak to them, and engage in unspeakable acts with their remains. His depravity knew no bounds. But what makes Kemper even more disturbing? He started with his own family. In 1964, at just 15 years old, he killed both of his grandparents because he was bored. Later, in 1973, he turned on his own mother, beating her to death, decapitating her, and, his own words, using her head as a dartboard. Unlike most serial killers, Kemper confessed willingly. He even called the police himself. When asked why, he said, "The original purpose was gone. I just wanted it to stop." To this day, he remains alive in prison, offering chilling interviews about his crimes. "I'm not a lizard. I'm not from outer space. I'm a human being. And sometimes I ask myself why I did it too." New York City, 1976. The streets were alive with disco, neon lights, and summer heat, but lurking in the darkness was a man hunting for blood. David Berkowitz didn't need a knife or a rope. His weapon of choice? A .44 caliber revolver. He stalked lovers' lanes, targeting young couples in parked cars. Without warning, he'd fire through the windows, leaving bodies slumped over the seats. No warning, no mercy, just death. But what made Berkowitz truly terrifying? The letters. He taunted police and the media, leaving cryptic notes signed "The Son of Sam." He claimed a demon-possessed dog ordered him to kill, saying, "I am a monster, I am the Son of Sam, I love hunting humans." For over a year, the city lived in terror. People avoided sitting in cars, changed their hairstyles, and never walked alone at night. Then in August 1977, a parking ticket led police to Berkowitz's home. Inside, they found his kill journal, a diary of death. When asked why he did it, his response was chilling. "Well, you got me. He's still alive, rotting in prison. And despite claiming he's found God, the families of his victims will never forget the Son of Sam's reign of terror." For 2 decades, the Green River held a secret, a mass grave for dozens of women. Gary Ridgway was a truck painter by day and a ruthless killer by night. Between 1982 and 2001, he slaughtered at least 49 women, mostly runaways and sex workers, dumping their bodies along the Green River. He was a master manipulator, convincing victims he was safe, just another guy looking for company. But once he had them alone, he strangled them with his bare hands. Some he left in shallow graves, others he returned to commit unspeakable acts. And with each kill he became more confident, more methodical. For years Ridgway evaded capture, but in 2001, DNA technology finally caught up. A microscopic trace of evidence, a single strand of hair, sealed his fate. In court, he confessed without emotion, admitting, "I killed so many women, I lost count." Sentenced to life without parole, Ridgway remains America's deadliest confirmed serial killer. But the most disturbing thought? Some of his victims have never been found. He seemed ordinary, a church leader, a husband, a father. But behind closed doors, Dennis Rader was the embodiment of evil. From 1974 to 1991, he bound, tortured, and killed at least 10 people, including entire families. And unlike other killers, Rader wasn't driven by impulse. He planned every detail. He stalked his victims for weeks, learning their schedules, breaking into their homes, and waiting. Sometimes he would hide in their closet for hours, listening to them breathe, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And after the murders, he wrote to the police. He mocked them. He gave himself a name, BTK, bind, torture, kill. For decades, BTK remained a ghost. But in 2004, his own arrogance led to his downfall. He sent police a floppy disk, asking if it could be traced. They traced it within minutes, straight to Rader's church. In court, he described his murders with zero emotion, treating them like a checklist. His lack of remorse left even the judge speechless. BTK is locked away forever, but his legacy serves as a chilling reminder. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who seem the most normal. He may be the most infamous serial killer to never be caught. Between 1968 and 1969, a mysterious figure terrorized Northern California, taunting police and media with cryptic letters, ciphers, and phone calls. He shot lovers in parked cars. He stabbed teenagers in broad daylight. He toyed with detectives, leaving behind symbols and riddles that still remain unsolved. His letters boasted of his murders, mocking the police, daring them to catch him. In one chilling note he wrote, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." His ciphers contained hidden codes, some cracked, others still a mystery. And despite countless investigations, he was never identified. Was he a former cop? A military expert? A madman lost to time? To this day, the Zodiac Killer's identity remains one of the greatest mysteries in true crime history. And perhaps the most terrifying thought? If he was never caught, he could have lived a normal life, had a family, walked among us. Some of the worst serial killers in history are still out there. The Zodiac Killer, never caught. The Long Island serial killer, never caught. The Cleveland torso murderer, never caught. Somewhere in the dark corners of America, a predator watches. Waiting, studying, planning. They blend in. They shop at the same stores. They smile at you in passing. So, how many serial killers have you walked past? Lock your doors. Trust no one. And most importantly, never assume you're safe. They were fathers, husbands, friends. They lived among us, unnoticed, for years. But here's the real question. How many are still out there? Not every killer is caught. Some vanish without a trace. Some could be watching this right now. So tell us, which of these cases disturbed you the most? Which one will keep you awake tonight? Hit like if this video made you uneasy. Subscribe if you crave more chilling true horror. And turn on notifications. Because next time we're diving even deeper. And who knows? The next story might be closer than you think.